Today I'm at Torphichen Preceptory, located in the small village of Torphichen in West Lothian in Scotland. This is a remarkable ruined building, grand in stature, in an otherwise small, sleepy village. Yet although today this is a quiet rural setting, it hasn't always been like this, because this was once the headquarters of the Knights Hospitalier in Scotland, a powerful international military and religious order. In this video, I'll tell you the history of this building and the role the knights who lived here played in shaping the world we know today. So, who are the Knights Hospitalier? Well, the organisation originated in the 11th century in Jerusalem during the time of the First Crusade. They were not originally a military order, but a charitable organisation founded by merchants from Amalfi, an Italian coastal republic, who established a hospital in Jerusalem around 1023 to care for the sick and poor Christian pilgrims. The community was formally organised as a religious order following the capture of Jerusalem in 1099, and was officially recognised by Pope Paschal II in 1113 under the name the Order of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem. The first leader of the order was a man called Blessed Gerard, also known as Gerard Thom or Gerard Tenque. He was known for his humility, piety and administrative skills, and it's likely it was those skills and traits that convinced the Pope to officially recognise the order. But there were some problems, as the hospital and lands owned by the Christians was getting raided regularly, and more pilgrims talked of having been beaten up. It all got to Gerald, and he decided to encourage followers to take up arms and defend Christian territories in the Holy Land. So the combination of the papal recognition and the chance to have a good old punch-up really started to draw in men from noble families across Europe, and the order started to develop into a religious military force. But let's leave Jerusalem and return back to Torphichen. The year is 1140, 20 years after the death of the founder Gerard, and the preceptory is about to be founded here. But why? At that time, King David I of Scotland was keen on expanding the influence of the Christian religion in Scotland. A shortcut to achieving this was to engage with European monastic communities and religious orders, and one of these was our Knights Hospitalier. So David did a deal with Gerard's successor, a French man called Raymond Dupuy, and together they founded the preceptory in Torphichen. But why here? Well, Torphichen was already an important religious area. There had likely been Christian worship here since early medieval times, and there were 4 sanctuary stones positioned in the surrounding countryside. These were defining a mile-wide circle zone of sanctuary around the church, giving legal protection to those who entered it. That and Torphichen's central location meant it was a no-brainer for David, and he gave the knights the go-ahead. So the preceptory was built right here in the middle 1100s, and it became the centre for the knights in Scotland and a base to operate from right across the known world. Head of the preceptory is the local preceptor, and history doesn't really mention who was the first, and often there are gaps as to who had the role and when they had it. However, let's fast forward to the 13th century and we do get a name of William de Torphichen, maybe a local lad then. As preceptor, he would have been responsible for managing the extensive hospitalier estates across Scotland, including collecting rents, administering justice on the lands they controlled, and maintaining the preceptory buildings. The order grew to manage extensive landholdings throughout Scotland, including properties in Ayrshire, Galloway, the Borders and the North East. These estates were sources of income through rents, agriculture and legal rights. And the preceptory functioned as a centre of religious worship, estate administration and training, both monastic but also weaponry. While William was building things up nicely in Scotland, Raymond Dupuy had set a course for the order into a much more military context. He went on to create the Rule of the Order that outlined both the spiritual discipline and the military obligations of its members. He showed this rule of order to the then Pope, Eugene III, in 1145, who was so impressed he approved the rule, and in doing so made the Hospitallers one of the first recognised military orders of the Church. Back in Scotland, William, and subsequent preceptors such as Gilbert and then John, both of Torphichen, and in the 14th century William de Chisholm, kept the knights on the path of the order. But there was trouble coming, as when Scotland's King Alexander III died in 1286 following an accident, there was to be a bunch of mighty battles coming. I've already done a video about where Alexander III died on this channel, which gives a bit more context on this turbulent time, but basically it was all heading towards the wars of Scottish independence. It's not clear, but it may have been the case that Robert the Bruce might have spoken with William and asked for the help of the knights. But as they ultimately answered to the Pope and not to kings, it's not clear if they fought at all, on either side, although some say they did fight for the English king. Perhaps the most significant battle during this war was the Battle of Stirling Bridge in 1297. Scots forces, led by Andrew Murray and the more well-remembered William Wallace, were victorious over the English. Soon after, Wallace was knighted and named Guardian of Scotland, and he decided to base himself at the Preceptory. You'd think maybe the knights might not have liked that, but apparently they had just run away. Maybe they did fight for the English after all. But it was only a year later, after the defeat at the Battle of Falkirk in 1298, that Wallace did his own running away. And there was still much fighting to be done over the next 59 years, until in 1357 a handshake at the Treaty of Berwick gave Scotland its independence and it all calmed down. The knights had returned to Torphichen by then and could get back to what they did best. No, not fighting, because over time they had become less interested in punch-ups and more interested in making money. So it was estate management, religious duties and diplomacy all the way. But this didn't work out for them in the long run. More on that in a minute. But these were good times and allowed for a notable figure in Torphichen's history to make his mark, Sir William Knowles, who served as preceptor in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. He was not only the head of the Knights Hospitalier in Scotland, but also held prominent political offices. Knowles became Lord High Treasurer of Scotland and was later appointed Grand Prior of the Order. He was a well-connected figure at the royal court, particularly during the reign of King James IV of Scotland. His influence extended beyond religious duties, and he was actively involved in political decision-making. Records suggest he was ambitious, and some contemporaries speculated that he may have had aspirations towards the Scottish crown, although no such claims were ever made officially. Knowles died in 1513 along with King James IV and much of the Scottish nobility at the Battle of Flodden. What a disaster! Anyway, Knowles remains one of the high points of the Preceptory's political influence, but this also marked the start of its decline. In 1553, Sir James Sandilands found himself to be the last preceptor of the order in Scotland. Sandilands came from a prominent family and had connections with the court of Mary, Queen of Scots. He witnessed the increasing pressure on Catholic institutions and realised that the future of the Hospitallers in Scotland was uncertain. The Protestant Reformation was upon the land, and this meant the abolition of the Roman Catholic Church's authority and the closure of monasteries and religious houses. The Preceptory looked doomed. So in 1563 he hatched a cunning plan. He did a dodgy deal where he renounced Christianity and surrendered the lands and possessions of the order to Mary, Queen of Scots. She, in return, drew up a royal charter granting him the estates back as private property, and gave him the title of Lord Torphichen. I mean, that doesn't sound dodgy in the slightest. This deal did ensure the survival of the Preceptory's physical estate, but it was the end of the order in Scotland as a religious and military institution. The remaining knights either began a secular life, returning to family lands, or becoming part of Protestant society under pressure from the new religious regime. However, some simply left the country, heading back to the order's last stronghold, Malta. Just a year after Sandilands' deal with Mary, the Ottomans invaded Malta, and the knights repelled them during the Great Siege of Malta, enhancing their reputation across Christian Europe. so there was still fighting to be done for some. With now no significant role to play, the preceptory building was plundered for materials that would be repurposed for other local buildings, and the rest would start to fall into ruin over time. But it wasn't all bad, because the medieval church remained in use and was eventually adapted into the parish kirk, serving the local Protestant community that has remained in operation ever since, with regular services and community events. And within the graveyard are medieval grave slabs bearing sword and cross symbols, likely marking the graves of knights who served the order here at the preceptory. Today this site is managed by Historic Environment Scotland, and during summer weekend afternoons it is possible to explore the interior for a nominal fee. It's a really interesting place to visit and a chance to relive the legacy of the Knights Hospitalier in Scotland and their influence on land ownership and local history in the area. But what about Sir James Sandilands and the title of Lord Torphichen? Well, it continues to this day, with it currently being the 15th Lord Torphichen, a James Sandilands, holding the title as well as the title of Chief of Clan Sandilands. He carries on the family lineage and resides in the nearby Calder House, but that's a whole other video. Thanks for watching this history of the Torphichen Preceptory. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more, and I'll see you on my next video somewhere else in the world. See ya!